Those of us who have attended many of these induction ceremonies have heard new members of the Hall of Fame credit others as giants upon whose shoulders they acknowledge having stood. I am here today to introduce for induction one of those giants, Sam Cheris, upon whose shoulders many of us stood. Sam's influence shows up in almost every aspect of the sport, at home and abroad. He has been a towering presence in American and international fencing for decades. Everywhere one looks in this sport, one sees Sam's fingerprints. His contributions are so wide-ranging and of such endurance that it would be impossible for me to catalog them here. But I will mention a few. Youth fencing, Sam did that. Team athlete funding, Sam did that. Pulling USA fencing out of insolvency and placing it on a firm financial footing, Sam did that. Creating a commission that allows referees to choose their own leadership, Sam did that. Requiring that the business of the FIE be conducted in English and Spanish as well as French, Sam did that. Taking a random list of rules and codifying them as the FIE statute, Sam did that. I could go on, but I think you get the point. I've been asked to limit my comments to 2.5 minutes, and so I'm going to stop. But Sam didn't do all these things alone, but without them, none of those things, without him, none of those things would have happened. He did these and myriad other things while serving as USA Fencing's president and treasurer and on countless committees. In the FIE, his positions include the executive committee, the Promotion, Communication, and Publicity Commission, and he has chaired the legal commission for years. To him, the FIE owes not only its multilingualism and its statutes, but also its disciplinary system and its safeguarding code. He has organized 2 world championships and worked dozens of competitions in multiple capacities, from referee to chair of the Olympic direct lot technique. It has been perceptibly observed that the further one stands from a problem, the easier the solution appears. Sam has never been one to stand back and offer easy answers to difficult situations. He digs in, he informs himself, he analyzes the angles, and he proposes a realistic situation, or a realistic solution. His proposals are usually accepted and effective, but whether embraced or not, the intellect he brings to them cannot be denied. The FIE has recognized Sam by making him a member of honor and by including him in the pantheon of its Hall of Fame. It is high time that we too recognize what he has done for fencing in this country and worldwide. It is therefore with great pleasure that I introduce Samuel D. Cheris as the newest contributing member of USA Fencing's Hall of Fame. Sam?
I would like to thank those who made it possible for me to be able to be here accepting the induction into the USA Fencing Hall of Fame. The USA Fencing Board of Directors, Dr. Alperstein, who introduced me, and a gentleman by the name of John Zayak, who thought it was important enough for me to be here in person that he arranged hassle-free transport from Denver to Phoenix. I want to thank my wife, Susie, for shepherding me through this. I have not been an easy character to shepherd. My grandson Marty, who will take off soon after I speak, because he fences tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, carrying on a tradition of multiple generations of people who are involved in the sport, as well as my daughter Stacy and my son-in-law Aaron. My acceptance of this award is not only about my accomplishments, but also about the turning points in all our lives that allow us to fulfill the passion that many of us have for the betterment of the sport of fencing. Before we discuss those turning points, the question should be asked, why fencing? Because there's no bench in fencing. Everybody has an equal opportunity on any given day to participate. Because there's no physical body type needed for a participant to be successful. And because meaningful fencing is enhanced by intellectual skill as well as physical. So back to discussion of decisions. 1. After high school, I had a choice. I could go to the University of Pennsylvania, which had a top-tier fencing team, or I could go to Brooklyn College, which barely had a varsity program. We had 9 men in 9 spots on the team. I had 4 coaches in 4 seasons. Family economics chose Brooklyn College because my academic goal was to follow undergraduate studies in accounting with a law degree. I was an adequate foil fencer, but never made elite ranks. Number 2, should I follow the advice of the deans of Stanford Law School who advise incoming law students? Look to the right of you, look to the left of you. One of you will not be here at the end of this year. You have to give all your attention to the study of law. And I said, no. I always say no. I went to work with Gene Hellewell, who was in charge of Stanford's men's and women's foil program, and made fencing a varsity sport. Much to the chagrin of my law professors, Gene and I elevated the sport to club status, and then with the addition of epee and saber, we were granted varsity status, and although it's been a rocky road, we have celebrated 50 years as a varsity program at Stanford University. I coached, I refereed. The intercollegiate means I learned how to run events, including the Western Intercollegiates then held at Stanford. My strength appeared to be in fencing administration and refereeing rather than competing, which I just did for the fun of it and to annoy other people. Number 3, while I enjoyed competing, my interaction with Jerry Baumgart's Colorado division led me to be a member of the bout committee for the 1978 National Championships in Florida and as chair of the bout committee for the 1979 Nationals in Colorado Springs. My refereeing status was also enhanced as I was awarded a 1 in epee. At the same time, I began a 40-year journey on the FOC, Fencing Officials Commission, later the Referees Commission, including my reorganizing the body 2 different times and being chair for 12 years. Thus, my administrative involvement outpaced my competitive activities. 4. 1986 began my entry into U.S. national fencing politics. Treasurer quit. Organization put out the call for a new treasurer. The board selected me, and I was able to get the organization into solid financial condition. In 1988, I ran unopposed for president with a goal to take international team selection into the hands of competing athletes rather than administrative selection groups. A senior circuit had just been formulated, but the only national event other than that was the Junior Olympics for cadets and juniors. I started the cadet and junior circuit in 1988, a youth circuit for under 10, under 12, under 14 in 1989. I introduced points for all levels and teams that were to be selected by who had the most points and not who was a member of the most influential club. I convinced the athlete rep, one of whom was here, that if U.S. fencing were ever to become internationally competitive, our teams would have to include international points in our ratings. This has led to our dominance in the cadet and junior world rankings. I think I turned over the medals to Phil when I came into this competition yesterday. Number 5, Trevor Polligy was our member of the executive committee of the FIE. He convinced me I had a future in the FIE, and I became his protege. I was elected to the promotion commission and was responsible for acquiring country colors and names on uniforms. 1992, Rene Rock, president of the FIE, the International Federation, and Java asked me to run for a seat on the legal commission. I have been president of that commission since 1996, except for a 4-year hiatus. In 1996, Java decided not to run for executive committee of the FIE and put me up instead. I served 2 terms. Number 6, from 1980 to 1996, I faced the decisions of international referees today. Use all of my vacation time, and a little more, to referee internationally or focus more on my non-fencing career. I chose to enhance my referee on foil, 1980 to 1988, and epee 1988 and 1996, securing an A in epee before I had to stop refereeing due to my election to the FIE Executive Committee. 7, in 1988, to keep the U.S. from embarrassing itself internationally, the dynamic duo, Java and Rene, asked me to pick up the gold in March of 1988, the host of the Indianapolis World Championships, Rene, and said it couldn't be successfully held in Indianapolis. In the 90 days from March to July, I organized and financed the World Championships in Denver, in the block. I later organized the 1993 Cadet and Junior World Championships. 8, although I had retired from U.S. fencing politics after my stints as treasurer and president in the 80s, in 2012, I decided to again run for treasurer because the prior administration had run the organization into the red by $1.5 billion. USA Fencing had no line of credit, no credit card, was behind in payment to vendors, including tournament staff, by 6 to 9 months. It took me almost 3 years to straighten that mess out. Donald was nodding his head, he was there with me. Turning point 9, in 2020, my last major challenge was presented. The nominating committee of USA Fencing declared in 2016 and 20 that no candidate other than the incumbent had the capabilities to run for president. The incumbent was eminently qualified, but there had to be more than one person capable of leading the organization. With the help of Cat Holmes, Don Alberstein, Gloria Marshall Holmes, I formulated the U.S. Fencing Leadership Academy to help develop the next leaders, 10 to 15 per year, by having them attend 10 3-hour training sessions. Our 3rd class will graduate tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Please come. During these 63 years, I had to make choices that affected my law firm, my company, my family, and fencing, as well as keep my eye on my passion, which is what fencing could do for the youth coming into the sport. Marty may have been. I hope when you look to your passion, fencing will be included. And you'll add the extra turning point to keep fencing as part of your life. We need you, and you can be a force for good. Consider applying for the Leadership Academy when the next class opens and learn the skills necessary to be a super competent leader of USA Fencing. Thank you.
I don't know how many of you have been on an airplane trip with Peter Westbrook coming back from Europe. Those of you who know Peter are aware that he can sometimes talk a bit. On one trip from a World Cup in the late 80s, we were all pretty much talking all night. Once we finished arguing about why it takes longer to go back to the United States than to Europe and the whole Airstream thing, and of course whether a Medal of Honor is more important than an Olympic gold medal, that took about 4 hours. Peter started talking about his ideas of fencing and an inner city program for youth in New York City. Well, we all know where that went. About 4 or 5 years later, a 7-year-old, in 1992, a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old came to the first Saturday of the Fencing Foundation. Ivan Lee was the 11-year-old, and Kamara James was the 7-year-old. They started talking and found out that for both of them, this was their first day. They became friends for the rest of their lives. When they left, they both started asking each other how they liked it. They said something along the lines of, well, they liked the fencing, but they really didn't like the scary coach. Was it Mikhail? Nope. Was it Aki? Was it Peter? It was Rothschild. Along with Aki Spencerell, Aaron and Keith Smart, Ivan Lee, she became part of the Five Musketeers. Because of the hard life that Kamara endured, the Musketeers were there for her. She spent many nights on couches, and I'm sure they helped in many other ways. Peter has asked me to thank the Musketeers. Two of them are here tonight, Aki and Ivan, from the bottom of his heart for all that they did for her for those years. While her life was far too short, the impact that she made on her friends, the foundation, and U.S. fencing will never be forgotten. And with that, I am honored to invite my good friend, and many think we look exactly alike, Ivan Lee.
Good evening, everyone. To make this short, it is, first of all, this is my second time up here. I was inducted into Hall of Fame back in 2014, and my good friend, thank you. And my good friend Jeff Buchanan is actually one who presented me. So it's good to see him here. First of all, congratulations to everyone else who's been inducted this evening. Among which is my assistant coach at LIU, Sean McClain. All right, Sean, one thing. This is bittersweet for me because Kamara is no longer with us, but I don't have a speech prepared because it's very easy to speak from the heart when you talk about someone that you love, someone that you consider family. Kamara was more than a teammate. Kamara was a sister. Kamara was a friend. Kamara was family to all of us, to Aki, myself, to Keith and Aaron. I know you guys know them very well. One thing that Peter did very well when he started the foundation is he instilled a family atmosphere. So when one person did well, we all did well. We traveled together. We would hop in a van, 8 or 9 or 10 of us. You know, we had 2 hotel rooms, one for the boys, one for the girls, and 6 of us in one room. We would sign up, we would go compete, and it didn't matter where you were. If one of your teammates was fencing, everybody went over there and cheered them on. We did everything together. Kamara didn't have it as great as the rest of us did, but we never held that against her. She was one of ours, and we always wanted to make her feel like she was part of the family. I remember when she got into Princeton, it was a major accomplishment, especially growing up in a single family household in the south side of Jamaica, Queens. Anybody who's familiar with Queens knows it was a rough neighborhood. When she got into Princeton, we were all very happy for her, but because of life and circumstances, she didn't really have a place to go home. So I remember every semester, I go pick her up, grab all her stuff, put it in the car, drive her to Princeton. All right, girl, you're gonna be all right. She would come back with a 4.0, and we had to pick her up from campus, and she's like, I need some place to stay for this summer. And I'm like, stay at my place, you stay with Aaron, you stay with Keith, you're family. Anything you need, we got your back. And so we were there for her the whole time. She made it all the way through Princeton, she graduated, she made the Olympian team at age 19, which at the time was unheard of. Now, you know, we get 13-year-olds making Olympic teams, but back then, it just wasn't a thing. She was a legend way before she reached her prime. And anybody that knew her just knew someone who was a ray of sunshine. She was always smiling, she was always laughing. And Steve told you guys about the story about when we first started fencing. Peter made all the new kids sit to the side and watch while everyone else warmed up. And Mike, who's now McClain and Clover, but we know him as Mike Lofton, was running the warm-ups. And she was sitting next to me, and she said, "Is this your first date?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh my God, it's my first date too." And she just started laughing. And anyone who's ever been around, I know she could laugh. And we became friends right away. So I remember when I got the phone call from Keith telling me that she passed, and it hit hard because I never had a death in the family. That was someone that close. Again, she was a sister to all of us. You know, we did everything together, so it was tough to handle. But I have a picture in my basement. It's a picture of Aaron, Keith, Kamara, and myself at the 04 Olympics in Athens. And I'm happy to say that everyone in that picture is now Hall of Famer. So, Kamara, this one's for you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So my name's Ray Chang. I was on the 2014 as the replacement athlete, and Sean, I could not be more honored and privileged to introduce you tonight into the 2023 Hall of Fame. So I've known Sean since I was 12. So this is basically about 35, almost 36 years. And if there's one phrase that I could use to describe him as a fencer when I first met him, is that he was the future of American fencing when we were youth fencers. He really was. I remember the first time I saw him at an NAC, and we called them NACs back then. They weren't called NACs for the younger people in the room. But you had this tall blonde kid with a gold lame, rec specs, a French handle. He was running, he was flashing, he was flicking. He had this really fast circle six repost. I mean, he was everywhere on the strip. He came out of nowhere from South Bourgeois in Round Rock, Texas. And as I remember it, Sean was basically fencing for first or winning most national events. As a cadet fencer, he was fencing in the final of senior events, which wasn't really, like I was saying, that wasn't done before. And I don't think, with all due respect to people from, the foil fencers from that era, I don't think they knew what was coming at them, because there was no fencer like Sean McClain before, and he was one of a kind. In high school, he moved to Rochester to train with Bucky, and he took the fencing world by storm. He continued to do that. So at one NAC, he won the cadet and junior event in foil, and then he also won the cadet and junior event in epee the same weekend, which is like ridiculous. He made the top 16 at Cadet Worlds, or maybe it was the top 8, which was an unbelievable result for American fencing at the time. And then, as a junior fencer in 1994, he won Division I men's epee nationals. And I could be wrong, but I think you were losing 14 to something, and you came back and won. And this is how I recall it. And then the following year, he won NCAAs in men's foil for Stanford, and was silver medalist at the Pan American Games in men's foil. And then in 2001, he was a Division I men's foil national champion. So he just constantly pushed all of us, his peers, his competitors, his friends, to higher and higher levels. And I have some quotes from some people from the past. So here's a quote from the legendary Cliff Bear. So Cliff, first of all, Cliffy says, he wishes you his best, and he says congratulations, and he says, well, where can I start? There's just too much material. But he said that his favorite quote from Sean was, fencing is like a dog sled race. Unless you're the front dog, the view is always the same. Here's a quote from Keith, Keith Smart. Keith says, Sean was a generational talent. The man won national titles in epee and foil in college and seniors. The thing that blew me away with Sean was when we were both at the 96 and 2001 big training camps. He was there for the foil guys, but then he would suit up and fence with the epee guys because they needed him to fence with them. And he held his own with them in practice. Amazing athlete, fencer, and friend. This is from Peter Devine, who was on the '96 Olympic team. Some great stories here. On and off the strip, the Sean I knew was a force of nature. If a miracle was needed, whether it was coming back from an impossible deficit in a bout, or getting to a competition across dozens of international borders, despite having forgotten his passport, Sean was your man. He was strong as an ox, both mentally and physically. I remember the World Cup when he snapped his handle just by squeezing it too hard, which even impressed his opponent, Stefano Cerioni, the champion. When we played hearts, he would count cards to figure out what everyone was holding, ensuring he would not be the one to suffer the penalty that fell to the loser, which was usually me. And there were some severe penalties in those hearts games, which are not family friendly to share. Sean was an incredibly talented fencer, and I'm told he's an even more talented coach. I'm lucky to have grown up competing with him, and his students are certainly luckier to learn from him. Congratulations, Sean, well deserved. This is from Felicia Zimmerman. More than several occasions, I would get to the club from high school, and Bucky and Sean would be playing intense games of ping pong. And when I asked how long you guys have been doing this, they would often say since the lesson time, which was probably several hours ago. As for American fencing, he was a star during his time, and similar to Ben Atkins, who is here tonight, he was talented in both foil and epee. Long limbs, smart, fast, and strong. He had one of the strongest flicks I've ever known. No one left the strip without some welt or bruise on your back. After graduating from Stanford, Sean could have gone on to be successful in anything he desired in life, but when he and Jed founded Empire United over on West 30th Street in Manhattan, I was really excited for them. And the number of national level and world-class fencers who came out of this club, there are just too many to name. Rayson Bowden, Adam Mathieu, who's here tonight, Brian Kaneshige, Michael Wu, Margaret Liu, James Chen, James Liao, and then last but not least, Nolan and Lauren Scruggs. Sean didn't just create a training environment that would produce world-class fencers. He created a community. He created a place where people could pursue their passion, take risks, and chase their dreams. It comes from a place of positivity and honestly caring. I can say this with honesty because my kids Parker and Ellie have started working with Sean over the last 2 years. And he'll be off with Adam or Lauren at a World Cup and be back at FC giving lessons to all of his youth fencers with the same level of intensity and 100% of his attention. I have some quotes about him as a coach. This is from Felicia again. He's thrived as a coach, which is a longer lasting legacy. I clearly remember the day when he told me he wanted to be a fencing coach, and I think it was the bravest thing and smartest decision he ever made. If you want to speak to Sean's success as a coach, you can mention not only did he train under Bucky, but he was helping me out even as a cadet. He was someone who I could trust even during the 2000 Olympic season. He was always trying to find some kind of mental angle with the opponent, which I usually ignored, but his tactical advice was always very good. Here's a quote from Alex Martin, who later joined Empire United as a coach. Congratulations, Sean. You have an incredible talent for simplifying the nuances of fencing and making the sport enjoyable and accessible to each and every person you coach. I'm grateful for the time we spent working together, the things you taught me, and our ongoing friendship. And then I'll end with this quote from Brian Kaneshige. Sean once told me, there's a reason a pack of lions is called pride. For beyond what he taught me about loving the sport of fencing, he instilled in us a belief that we take pride in our fencing and ourselves as athletes, and that we always strive to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, no matter how much talent or good fortune we were born with. So yes, Sean, you were the future of American fencing, but little did we know, as your fellow fencers and competitors, that your impact on the sport and your legacy in the sport would go far beyond your results as a competitor. far more important than the number of individual medals you won or that your students have won is the community you founded and the positive difference that you've made in so many people's lives by passing on your knowledge and love for the sport of fencing. As you can see, I've reached out to so many people from our era and from the present day, and we're all thrilled for you. So congrats on making it into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, thank you, Greg, for those kind words. I had no idea I'd said so many smart things. Oh my God. People come to me with stories all the time about something that I did or said. I don't remember anything. I'm going to have to take this off because I'm getting old now. I can't read very well without them on. First, I'd like to thank Steve Romano in the Hall of Fame and all those who voted for me. It's truly an honor to be a member of such a distinguished group. I would especially like to thank Andy Shaw for nominating me. I remember when he called to ask if I'd like to be considered. I didn't feel like I deserved it because I had such a short career, if you ask me, but I reluctantly agreed to go onto the ballot. I'm in awe. The reason why I didn't feel like I deserved it is because I'm in awe of what our U.S. fencers have been accomplishing this generation, the generation before that, and continue to amaze me. I'd like to thank all my friends and family who have come out tonight to celebrate with me. I'd like to thank all my opponents and teammates over the years. When I look back at my career, I don't think about the matches as much as I do the people and all the adventures we had together. Those who know me know that I'm a bit of an introvert. I'm terrible at staying in touch with friends and family. I have difficulty expressing myself at times. I never had that problem in fencing. From the start, I saw it as a conversation. I understood that there is an invisible battle of intention happening. Who's doing what to who? You had to trick the other fencer with your movement and not let them trick you. I was able to recognize patterns and anticipate what they were going to try to do next. I'd like to thank my first coach, Gary Murray, for opening the Round Rock Fencing Center 37 years ago. Gary was a Marine paratrooper, fought in Vietnam. He ran a tight ship. Gary's one of the most optimistic people I've ever met and is one of my biggest fans. Shortly after joining the Round Rock Fencing Center, Gary introduced me to the man who developed my love of fencing. His name was Gerard Puchadou. Puch would drive up from San Antonio 2 hours each way, twice a week to give me lessons. Any of you guys ever known Puch? He was a very colorful guy with a big personality and really loved his students. I have fond memories of all the many lessons we had in my driveway. My next coach was the great Bucky Leach. So many of my people are asking that, that's why it's so hard for me, sorry. Bucky was doing amazing things in Rochester, New York. I remember begging my parents for months to let me move to Rochester to be part of the program. Bucky taught me many things, but mostly I remember about discipline and the value of hard work. He was a father figure to me and a major role in shaping me into the person I am today. As you know, Bucky passed. I really miss that guy. Not a day goes by that I don't think about him. I never took any upper lessons, but I'd like to thank George Mason and Ben Atkins for taking me under their wing, pretty much teaching me everything I know about epee. That major comeback that you heard him talking about, Ben was a major part of that. I remember at the break, or I don't remember how it worked back then. I've been through every single kind of fencing, 10 touch, 5 touch, 2 and 3, all those things. But at some point there was a break, and Ben told me exactly what was going to happen, and I just executed his plan. I'd like to thank my parents for allowing me to pursue my fencing dream. They allowed me to move away to live in Rochester with a foster family. Without their support and encouragement, none of it would have been possible. One of my favorite things to do after I won a big tournament was to call them and tell them how badly I'd done. Only to say, just kidding. It was before the internet, so they had no idea, right? They were always quick to console me and tell me it was okay and that they loved me. It's incredible how often they fell for this. I just couldn't turn off that devious part of my character that allowed me to thrive in competition. My mom used to say, I want to dedicate this moment to my mother. My mom used to say that she lost her son fencing. She lost her battle with cancer shortly after I was voted in. I'm happy that she was alive when I received the news, and she was so happy, but it was heart-wrenching when she realized she wasn't going to be around for tonight's ceremony. I love you, Mom.
I first met Johnny Moreau at Columbia University at a pre-Olympic training camp before 1984. I think, who was it, Jack Keane was the captain, and Chad Elfesh and the gang felt that no one else could room with either of us, so why not put us both together? Johnny was crazy Army, I was crazy Navy, it just was a match. I remember I went to my room, and there he was. After 2-a-day practices and dinner, we were hanging out in the room. Around about midnight, John started putting his shoes on, and I asked, "Where are you going, John?" He said he was going to go for a walk in Riverside Park. 84, Columbia area, Riverside Park. I said I thought that was kind of a pretty bad idea. But he was very confident, said, "No problem, I need some air, and I've got this." What I did not know then was that John was an 8th Dan black belt. Not just that one, but he had a couple more in some other areas too, in addition to being in modern pentathlon and the fencer. Well, he came back a bit later without a scratch, and I forgot all about it. Of course, the next day I read in the Times about all the mayhem that happened in New York that night, and I was wondering, Batman? One of the most amazing things that I've ever saw him do was win the 2003 national championships. One after another, he disposed of Olympians. Some of them might be sitting here. Hey, Chris, how you doing? But what makes this really, really incredible, he was 72 when he did it. It was my incredible honor to welcome to the podium two-time Olympian Sensei John Moore.
Thank you. Well, here we are, and I'm very honored to be here. I thought I'd take a page from Bill Reed. Thanking all the people that I got. But then I figured, no, I'm not going to do that. That would be... But what I would like to do is actually tell you a story. 2 stories, matter of fact. First story is, how did I start fencing? 1970, I'm on a cross-country team. And we had this new guy, a 33-year-old fencer, who came to start a fencing program at a Division III school, which is one of the reasons that I did what I did a couple of years ago, about 8-9 years ago, and become the first person to start a Division I team from scratch in over 50 years. And the first one before that was Ron Miller, rest in peace. All right? So this young man's name was Paul Pesky, 5-time national champion, member of the 64, 68, 76, and 80 Olympic teams. A driving force. And so I'm out there on a cross-country team, and he was working out with the cross-country team because he was training for the pentathlon. And he convinces me to try pentathlon. Oh, that sounds good. What is it? You do this, this, and this. He says, can you swim? I go, yeah, I can swim. And I go, what are those black lines for? You're supposed to look at it. No. And your eyes were red. We didn't have goggles back then. So anyways, I started fencing with this team. I started with a little foil, a little epee. I've been about a week and a half maybe. And he calls me up on a Saturday morning. He goes, John, one of our kids has got the flu. And we're going to go fence Syracuse. Can you come down and fill in? And I go, okay, when do you want me? 15 minutes. So I run down, and I'm packing up my little jacket with silver buttons going around the side. Remember those? And I'm looking around, and I'm seeing all the guys on the team. I see Jerry Shaw, who was a fencing master. I see Rick Maxwell, saber fencer. I see Gene Detler, who was on the team. And I go, Coach, who's sick? And he goes, Robbie. And I go, Robbie Handelman, the current, chairman of the USFA, Fencing Coaches Association. And I go, but Coach, Robbie's a saber fencer. And he goes, yeah, I know. And he goes, I go, Coach, I've never touched a saber before. He says, don't worry, I'll show you how to hold it. So we go up there, he shows me how to make a head cut, he shows me how to make a head flank cut. He goes, he sends me up there the very first bout against the team captain. He goes, when they say fence, you run up there, remember when you can do that, and you hit the guy in the head as fast as you can, and as hard as you can. And he goes, and then you come back to the guard line, and you start to hit the guy in the head, and you hit him in the side. After that, you're on your own. So sure enough, ready fence. Boom! And I scream. I never scream. I say, ah! And come back, ready? With a boom! I broke the guy's rib almost. And now I'm going, now what do? And the guy's going, invitation for chest cut. When you could actually have phrases in saber. I look at my little lizard brain and I see a picture of the saber target raised up. Oh, man. I hit him in the hand, he dropped his weapon, I beat the guy 5-0. I won all my bouts. We lost 2 matches because our teammates couldn't stand up. They were laughing so hard. Every time I scored a touch, they just doubled up. So after that, I was hooked on fencing. All right, so that's how I got started in 1970. It's been 53 years, going on 53 years. The final story I want to tell you is back in 2008, Paul Pesty, my mentor, called him Papa. Many people did. They were privileged to know him. I really feel sorry for you if you've never met the man. A true genius. Anyways, he's dying. He decided he was going to die because he had lymphoma. It was very, very serious. And he just couldn't do the chemo, couldn't handle it. So he brings his hospital bed to his house. And he calls me in to help coach some high schoolers that he had until they got out of college. And I go up to him and see him in his hospital bed with things sticking out of his arms and stuff. And I go to give him a bro a handshake, and he goes, I still got it. So many years from now, I hope to be able to do the same thing and say, I still got it. Thank you very much.
The room looks different up here from down on the table where I was sitting. Hello everybody, I'm John Romano. I got a little speech about my friend Chris. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend Chris Olympian to be inducted in the U.S. Fencing Hall of Fame. For 40 years I've known Chris both on and off the fencing strip, and he's proven himself a champion in every sense of the word. I've been privileged to be his teammate, rival, and friend, so I think I can speak from experience when I say that Chris is a very, very good fencer, and he's truly deserving of this recognition. After Chris got word that he'd been inducted, he gave me a call and asked me if I would introduce him. I of course said yes, and it's fitting that I'm here tonight to help celebrate Chris's achievement. Looking back on my own fencing career, it's inextricably bound with Chris's. From the first day we met, from junior, collegiate, senior, and veteran events, from local club tournaments to national and international competitions. Chris has been with me every step of the way, and has always made those experiences so much more worthwhile. Were it not for Chris being part of my fencing life, my own fencing career would be so much less. He is a true brother in arms, and it's my privilege to introduce him to the Hall of Fame. Our first meeting was, of course, on the fencing strip. In the 1983 Junior Olympics, 40 years ago, 4 decades, we met each other in the cadet men's epee event, although they called it the under 16 back then. It was a first round match, and like many of our encounters, it ended in a loss for me. Shortly thereafter, Chris established himself at the senior level, making top 8 results at circuits and national championships. He did this while still in high school, which was really unheard of at the time. And similar success followed in college, where Chris and I were friendly rivals, he at Penn and I at Columbia. I suffered quite a few defeats at his hands, and the few victories that I got were so much sweeter for having defeated such a skilled opponent. After college, we became teammates at the athletic club, the New York Athletic Club, being coached by Dr. Kobler, another member of this Hall of Fame. Instead of just at the occasional competition, I got to fence Cheris at the club several times a week. Another debt that I owe him for being my training partner, helping me realize my own potential. All that hard work paid off for Chris when he made his first Olympian team in Barcelona in 1992. And it did not stop there. For over a decade, Chris is at the top of American epee fencing, qualifying for numerous national teams and had a U.S. National Epee Championship title in 2000 to his list of accomplishments, none of which were diminished by his 2003 loss to John Morrell, of course. Chris was always a fearsome competitor. His intensity and ability to focus were truly awesome. More than anyone I've ever fenced, he seemed able to tap into some primal force within himself, focus it like a laser beam, and use it to win fencing matches. Whenever I got on the strip with Chris, I knew I would be in for the fight of my life. Imagine getting into a cage with a tiger. That's what it's like to fence Chris alone. And Chris is still competing. In fact, just this week he added another victory to his tally, winning the Vet 50 event. He's a bit older and slower today than in his youth, but those same qualities that we are celebrating today with his induction into the Hall of Fame are still very much in evidence. I'll finish this introduction with something my son said to me about Chris. My son Nicholas is right here, he's in the audience. He's also a fencer, and he'll be competing in the youth events later this week. It was last year, and I was trying to decide for myself whether to register for a veterans competition. And I was weighing the pros and cons, and I was having maybe a crisis of motivation. And I mentioned this to my son, and he said, "But Dad, you have to go. You have to keep fencing. If you stop fencing now, I'm going to speech right away. But I remember. If you stop fencing now, you're not going to be able to fence Chris at the Vet 80 competitions in a couple of decades from now." So that really resolved my motivation. I signed up, and it's something I look forward to. But many decades from now, that Chris and I can get on this strip, we can salute each other, have a match that I'm sure will be very intense and close, and win or lose, salute each other, shake hands, and cherish the memory forever. So, yeah. And I really can't imagine a happier old age than that. And perhaps by then, in the age, I might finally figure out how to execute a feint deceit to get past this buried for years, perhaps. So I'll see you on the script, Chris, and congratulations.
Wow, that is a lot kinder than I was going to be to John. I have to say, I'm going to cut a lot out of this speech. I'm very humbled to be here today. I got these glasses on because I have to read the opposite of Sean. I'm very humbled to be here, honestly, today. As Sean mentioned, and this is no joke. I mean, if I didn't get in this year, I don't think I would ever get in, because we're going to have so many. I mean, we're stacked with gold medalists at the international level. I don't see anybody, like me to get in again, to be honest with you. So I'm very, very grateful to Lee Shelley, Steve Mormondo, the USFA board of directors,
for helping out in those early things. So thank you very much for that. So John kind of laid out the trajectory, and it's been set up there. I'm so fortunate to have been able to be doing this for 40 years. The main theme of what I want to talk about today is that for me, fencing, it's not so much the championships that happen in all decades, although I do care about those a lot. It's what happened in between, right? So for me, fencing has been my home. It's been my guidepost. It saved me in many, many occasions. In between all of those championships, fencing saved me many, many times. And by the way, just as a note for John, I've actually kind of done back of the envelope math. I think maybe you're better at math than I am, but I would say we probably fenced more than 1,000 times. Right? Would you say it's about right? No joke. I think that's about right. And I was going to... What's the score? Well, he was very humble. He's definitely beat me more times than I've beaten him. That's not even a question about that. But I will tell you that in the under 16 match in Florida, I beat him like 5-1 and he fell down. So for somebody who has renowned footwork, probably the best footwork epee, of my generation for sure, to have him fall down is something I'll always cherish. Let me just go on through these sort of chapters of my life. How did it save me? Well, the first part of my life in the juniors, I was kind of a latchkey kid. I could have easily gone down. I'm not a great back, let's put it that way. I wanted to play other sports, but nobody taught me how to do them. So I was very fortunate at the school that I went to, Oakwood. Turns out Daryl Cotton's son goes there, which I just found out was amazing. They had a fencing program taught by my first coach, Ted Katzoff, who I owe a lot of gratitude to, as well as the whole Pacific Coast community and Los Angeles community. He taught me great basic technique, but also how to be a gentleman and how to be passionate about the sport. And he was the first person that taught me the phrase that I've always used since I was 12 years old. It's not practice makes perfect, it's perfect practice makes perfect. And I've always remembered that and have a lot of gratitude for Ted. The other person that's basically been a second father to me throughout much of my life and had to deal with a lot of my teenagerness is here tonight also, Abdel Salem, who I have to give so much gratitude for. He's in a couple of chapters of my fencing life, but the first one was after the '84 Olympics. He decided to stay in Los Angeles, and I was one of the benefactors of that. And really, he showed me what was not just possible through fencing, but as a person. And he taught me how to be a fierce competitor. He really is the first person that taught me how to be a fierce competitor and a great human being. So thank you so much. I want to thank somebody who's not here tonight. The word gets back to Carl Borak. Carl was, he saw something in me and was very kind to me and really said, hey Chris, I think there's bigger things than you can even imagine out there. And obviously he'd seen it. And he also gave me a couple of grips that I still have to this day. He keeps asking for them back, and I'm never going to do that. I want to thank my sister Laura, who's here tonight. From that day, back in those days, there weren't too many of those fencing dummies that you see everywhere today. So she didn't fence, but what I did is I brought my uniform home, and I put it on her and the mask, and she would just stand there. And I would hit her, and after about like the third time, she's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm like, come on, how am I going to get better? But she's here, so I thank you for that. I want to thank my dad, who, while he wasn't really involved in fencing, he loved to travel. And he took me to my first away event it was in San Mateo, actually. He took the train from Los Angeles, Amtrak train. And that really was a huge part of my love of fencing, is getting to travel. And so I thank my dad for taking us all over the place to JOs in Tampa, I think it was the next one. And my mom, who also was not really involved, but she gave me the freedom and supported me. And I'll always be grateful for that. One last thing about that period of time was the Westside Fencing Center, which doesn't exist anymore. I can't even believe how many clubs there are in LA now. back then there was really only one, Westside Fencing Center, and that's how I started, and that was kind of a second home for me at that time. Then in college, I was saved again. I mean, I first of all wouldn't have gotten into Penn without fencing. There's no way I would have gotten in. So that's the first thing that fencing did for me in that period of time. But the much more serious thing was I had a great start. I won the NCAAs when I was a freshman, and sophomore year was going great. I took second. But in junior year, I only knew this kind of trajectory up to that point for the most part. It was the first time where I really got challenged and things weren't going that great. And I was trying to balance a lot of things in my life. And Solen was trying to keep me honest and try to keep my spirits up. And I was very petulant, very depressed. And I actually thought about quitting fencing at that time. And, but somehow, actually Solen kept to me and said, just keep going, keep trying. And just stay with it, it's okay. And nobody ever taught me that before, that we have ups and downs. I didn't know anything about that. I always thought if you didn't make it up, then you're terrible. And that was the first time I started to learn about this trajectory that's important in life, and I try to teach that to my son the best I can today. But it saved me at that point. I owe a lot of thanks to Dave McClain at Penn, who took me in with only hearing some things about me. I think he saw me fence once, but put a lot of faith in me and was always there for me throughout my whole time there. So I owe him a lot of gratitude. And the time I spent there was fantastic. Then the post-college time. This, I think, actually, for many American fencers, it can be the most difficult point. You're no longer a junior, you don't have that support system built in anymore, and you really got to find your way. Well, when I graduated from college, I didn't have a job. I didn't know where I was going to live. I knew I wanted to be in New York to train. That's all I knew. So once again, fencing was coming to my salvation. But that summer was really important. I was able to go to the World University Games and the Olympic Festival they had back then, but Jeff Buchan's, where's Jeff Buchan's? Jeff's back there. Jeff was a big savior for me that summer because you may not know this, my mother's maiden name is Cohen and I'm actually Jewish. And I got to go to the Maccabee Games in Israel. And a lot of people laugh about that, but it was a magical experience and helped me get through that time in my life because I was super depressed. Everybody else had a job except for me. Still didn't have a job, moved into New York, and this next person I have to mention also, so much gratitude, George Mason. George Mason, those of you know him, kind of a patron saint of epee, men's epee, let me sleep on his couch. He was always there for me, he gave me food, he took me out to eat. I didn't really have anything, place to live even at that point in time. And the New York Athletic Club and George gave me some direction. And then during that period, I finally got a job. And again, it was because of fencing. At the time, there was something called the Olympic Job Opportunities Program. And I got a job with what was then called 9X, became Verizon, and I've been in that industry my whole life. So once again, fencing was there for me. And one last thing I'll mention about that career is the current company I work for, Spirent, telecommunications, made a donation to the USFA on my behalf, being inducted here. And so, once again, it's part of the story. I have to thank some other people in that time. Dr. Aldar Kogler, John mentioned, changed my fencing. I had so many great coaches, but every one of them has added something. And Aldar took my technique in particular to a level that I hadn't been at before. I then was coached by Boris Lieberman. So many probably don't know him, but he also took my fencing to another level. And between 92 and 96, in particular for me, it was footwork. Helped me quite a lot with that. During that time, I got married to Colleen Clinton, and she supported me in so many ways during so many years, all the ups and downs of international travel, and was also my loudest cheering section, the first veterans tournament I went to, so I have a lot of gratitude and thanks to her. I also want to call out the AC was my home, still is my home. The New York Fencers Club also always welcomed me to train there, as I still do to this day, between the AC and the FC, so I have a lot of thanks to them. I'm going to read a really quick list of friends that I made during this time that have been everything to me. Chris Reor, Jim O'Neill, Marco Shima, Bruce Dugan who's here, Ben Atkins who's here, Jim Carpenter who was my teammate, competitor, and now my coach. Miles Phillips, Joe Sokolov, Steve Griffiths, who is the one that John beat in that epic bout. Mike Felchu, Dave Rosenberg, Matt Andreessen, Noah Zucker, who I still train with, Tamir Bloom, who is my son's pediatric orthopedist, who I take to way too often because he's a very gifted baseball player. Jan Viviani and Michael Alford, who many of you know, runs the New York Athletic Club in Columbia. All greatest of friends during that time. I would say, thanks to people who welcomed me into their world, like Steve Mormondo and Peter Westbrook, Donald Anthony, who's here tonight, Mikhail, Mike Goskin, Sharon Monclazier, the Marxes, John Freeberg, who's here tonight. And one person who I don't think I've heard mentioned tonight, which is hard to imagine, is Carla Mae Richards. Carla Mae was always like that. Always that mom, I could always get her on the phone. I don't even think that's possible. I don't think I can get anybody on the phone at the USFA anymore if I wanted to. Not for any bad reasons. She gets so busy, but I could always get her. So lastly is the vet period, and I'll just say this about the veterans. And I said this recently. Through all the ups and the downs, it was always I always felt like I was struggling. It wasn't until I got into veterans fencing I realized how much I love fencing. And John actually has helped me a lot with that. But my ego wouldn't let me quite do it, and partly because George Mason used to tell me, why are you going to go veterans? I was still making finals well into my 50s. John Moreau is sitting here beating my butt at 52. I thought it was 53, but it was 52. 72. But you know what? Here's the number one reason I decided to start competing as vet fencing is there's no way in the world I was going to let John Norma start doing more competitions and get more medals than me. So I decided I was going to do it. And I will say this about my history with John. Other than the closing ceremonies at the Olympics, the most moving moment for me in fencing was standing on the medal ceremonies at the World Veterans Championships with the gold medal and hearing the national anthem. So there's not a lot of people in this room who've probably had that opportunity. You have. That has. Greg, you have. I don't know who else you have. You have. But it's, for me, that was the most incredibly moving thing. So, veterans fencing gave me that. I wouldn't have that experience without that. And, during this time also, I have to thank Rick Luttrell, who's not here tonight, but cheered him on to win the 60s yesterday, the day before yesterday. Alex Abend became a coach, Carpenter, I mentioned. Alex Sinnis, Steve, where are you? Where's Steve and Cobra? Steve's over there. The Cobra Club I have to thank for hosting our Saturday morning vets practices. It's been fantastic. Lastly, I want to thank one more person. That's my son Finian, who's not here tonight because he's actually at the USA Baseball Training Center in Cary, North Carolina. He's an amazing athlete, amazing baseball player. He's an amazing person. And what he probably doesn't realize is that he inspires me every day to be the best person I can be, on and off the strip. And every time I've won recently, I actually think about him and what he does and how hard he works. And also some of the things he experiences, as a pitcher and a hitter, and I try to apply some of that stuff. But fencing's given me so much for so long. It's always been there for me, and I just want to say how grateful I am. So thanks very much.
Thank you. My mother would have loved to have been here for this, and I'm very sorry that she's not, but I appreciate and I'm glad to accept this induction ceremony as well as her induction into the U.S. Fencing Hall of Fame. Once upon a time, wrong speech, in a galaxy far, far away. That's the wrong speech too. But everybody's got a story. We've been listening to stories tonight. My mother has a story as well, and especially her life of fencing. I would say that she had three great passions. freedom. She loved coming to this country, fencing, and then family, especially fencing family. My mother grew up in war-torn Europe in Hungary during World War II. Her all-male cousins would come home at times from school during the summer, and she'd ask them, "What are you doing?" "We're practicing fencing." "Wow, that looks like fun. I'd like to try that too." And her cousins told her, "You can't do that. You're a girl." She proved them wrong repeatedly. In 1954, she took 5th place in the World University Games in Europe. In 1956, she came from communist Hungary to this country. The story that I heard was she rode on one bicycle with my father from Budapest to the Austrian border. Once in this country, she settled in the Midwest and went to many fencing competitions and won many of them. In 1976, she qualified as an alternate for the Olympics from the US. After that time, in her early 40s, she ended up going to college in order strictly to get a physical education degree so she could coach. She loved coaching. I remember she started at Northwestern and started the fencing program. After winning the Big Ten with the women's team, she had to go to the athletic coach and say, "Hey, we're just a club sport. We've won the Big Ten. We deserve to become a varsity sport." And that's how the fencing program progressed at Northwestern. She came in 1978 to Columbus and accepted a women's team coaching opportunity and enjoyed it. In 1980, she had the opportunity and privilege to coach the men's team as well. I remember her going to different trainings to be able to coach an epee and saber. They weren't familiar to her. I'm sure she loved the fact that now women fence all 3 weapons. I also remember as a teenager, she had so many trophies, and back then, don't know if they give them out now, as awards, they gave out daggers and swords with inscriptions on them for whatever competition she'd won. She made a shield and then mounted those swords on it, and it ended up hanging above our fireplace. A number of young men came by and were interested in dating me. They'd come in and they'd say, "What is that?" I would explain to them, "Those are awards that my mother won, and by the way, she's pretty good with a sword." Most of those young men I did not see again, I have to say. Just to be able to brag, she won 2 Big Ten championships, coached 2 winning Big Ten championship teams at Northwestern, then at Ohio State another 4, and then another 4 years when it was unofficial because the Big Ten didn't exist any longer. She coached 27 All-Americans. And she enjoyed every minute of it. She really enjoyed her fencers. Some of the things that I remember as a competitor, as she would attack, she would yell very loudly, and I think part of it was a scare tactic. She loved saber fencing. Were she to start fencing today, she would have chosen saber as her weapon. I remember her giving lessons, right-handed and left-handed, just to give variety to her fencers. She was a dedicated coach, and not only taught her fencers the skill of fencing, but also mentored them in life. I also remember, being on the fencing team, that she outlawed and made it a rule, fencers are not allowed to do anything else. You may not play a pickup game of basketball. You may not play any kind of football, nothing else. The fencers would never get injured from fencing. They'd get injured away from fencing. I also remember that she didn't really want to retire. What do I do now? And I remember probably one of her greatest senses of accomplishment when she did retire. She was glad to tell people it took 3 men to replace her position. Again, my mother enjoyed her passion the freedoms in this country and fencing, whether it was as a coach or as a competitor. And she would be most honored to be here to know that she's being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Yes, I'm back. Real quick though, I remember as a coach fencing against Ohio State with Charlotte as head coach. Shut up, Steve. Keep quiet. Careful. She was one of the toughest competitive coaches I ever went, and I just want to say this. One of those coaches that replaced her was Vladimir Nazarov. Okay, so this is not me. Jeff Buchanan shared the story with me earlier this week. When Jeff was team captain in Beijing, each member of the women's foil team, which won the silver medal, had a specific role. Erin Smart was the closer and went last. Her job was either protect the lead and finish or come from behind and catch up. Emily Cross was the gunslinger. Her job was to score touches. If the team was behind, she could erase the deficit. If the team was ahead, Emily could open up the lead and secure the win. But the team had an X factor. That was Hannah, who had the 7th leg of the match. Hannah's job was to keep the score close regardless of whether they were winning or whether they were losing. She frustrated not only her opponents, but also her teammates when they fenced because she was virtually impossible to hit. She earned 2 nicknames. One was the Noodle, and the other was the Force Field. Hannah seemed to have an imaginary force field which prevented her opponents from hitting her. Hannah set the table for Emily and Erin, and the team won the first ever Olympic women's team medal. Hannah could not be here with us this evening, but she'll always be remembered for her pivotal role in U.S. fencing. Thank you.
Your dad's a national champion, your dad's an Olympian, was what I heard growing up my whole life. But as a young kid, you don't understand necessarily what that means, because it's common stance for me. So I'd go over to friends' houses and I'd be like, yeah, my dad's an Olympian. And they'd be like, wow, that's awesome. I'm like, is your dad an Olympian? I'm like, no, that's rare. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, so it must be pretty cool because I hear it a lot. And fast forward to high school, and I'm reading an article about my dad training for the Olympic team with Jeff Kessler, Bert Freeman, and I'm like, oh my God, you trained 8 hours a day? You ran 3 miles after workouts? And I remember coming downstairs, I'm like a sophomore in high school, and I'm like, holy shit, Dad. This actually, like, you weren't born an Olympian. This actually, like, took work. Like, what? And, you know, I was reflecting with my brother, and I think I had just graduated college, and we were driving around, we were working, and we were talking about our dad, you know, the trials of life, you know, life's all not sunshine and rainbows, there's suffering, and, you know, as we all go through times of trials. But we were reflecting on our dad, and we're like, you know what? No matter what you throw at him, he always perseveres. No matter what.
Excuse me, Joey.
Uh-oh.
There's throwing something else at you. Just a minute. Are you sure you're talking about your father?
I think I am.
Could you move over, please?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marty Lyon, and back with me is Ed Ballinger and Jeff Kessler. You are all here to honor Ed Donofrio. You all think that he's a great person, a great Marine, a great dad, a great husband. Well, we're going to tell you the truth. Ed Donofrio is a freak of nature. So I'm going to give you a real quick story. So we were in Montreal, and we were checking into the Olympic Village, and they had guards there, and they were going through your luggage. And they gave us luggage, Samsonite, if anyone remembers that, and it was very light plastic, but it had a strong metal rim on the outside of it. So, of course, they were checking the luggage, and I was trying to put all my paraphernalia back in there, and Ed Donofrio, my friend, was standing right next to me. You know what he decided to do? He decided to jump up as high as he could and try and help me to close the luggage. Now, I didn't ask him to because my fingers were in the luggage. So I had just recovered from 18 stitches in my left hand. I was a lefty, courtesy of someone up here. And Ed Donofrio decided to wreck my fencing hand. Why? Because he didn't want me fencing in the individual. Is that correct, Ed? So, if you think you'd like to vote him into the Hall of Fame, I have second thoughts. Mr. Ballard.
I'm going to tell a little story that has nothing to do with fencing. I want to give you a rounded version of the true personality of Ed Donofrio. This is about 40 years ago. My wife Sally and I met Ed and his date down in Greenwich Village. That's New York. When we get on the subway and we're riding north, I think we're going to see a Yankee game. We get on the car, the doors close, and the train starts moving north. And Ed thought that this was the perfect opportunity to show everyone on that car his rendition of a chimpanzee. He reaches up behind him, he grabs hold of the handhold, lifts his feet off the floor, and starts hanging. After he's hanging for a few seconds, he starts making chimpanzee face and chimpanzee sounds. I cannot do them. I will not try to do them. Perhaps when Ed gets up here, you can persuade him to do a chimpanzee face and chimpanzee sounds. So he's hanging, making chimpanzee faces and chimpanzee sounds. And New Yorkers are, on the subway, they're used to seeing weird things. They don't care, they're smiling. They're smiling. But then Ed starts swinging. And he swings from one handhold to the next, going in the line. And then he goes back and forth and back and forth while he's making the chimpanzee face and the chimpanzee sounds. Then he swings across the train car to the other side and grabs hold. And then he swings back. And he goes back and forth across. The faces that had smiles and looks of joy are now turning to looks of concern. People are starting to move away. They're moving to the ends of the cars. There's two ends of each car, and they're starting to move away. Some people are starting to have looks of fear. They're not sure what's going on. After a few more moments, the car, because we're so local at this point, is pulling into the next station. The doors open. Now, I don't know how many people were planning to get off at the next stop. I do know that just about everybody did. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Kessler has a story to tell. Jeff is the United States Marine Corps teammate of Ed Donofrio.
So, in 1973, 50 years ago, 3 Marine officers decided to form a Marine Corps fencing team. It was myself, the great Olympic and national champion Kurt Freeman, and a guy from the Naval Academy named Ed Donofrio, a relatively inexperienced fencer. We, 6 months later, found ourselves competing for the National Foil Team Championship. And during the tournament, Ed had to go to the bathroom to relieve himself. And he is standing at the urinal, you'll forgive my frankness, and there's a gentleman next to him, who I'll identify later, who didn't know Ed, and Ed didn't know him. And he turns to Ed and says, you know, that Marine Corps team is pretty good. It's too bad they had no third man. Ed was the third man. That fellow at the urinal was mentioned earlier tonight, was Dave McClain, who was a great Olympic and coach of Penn, of course, and the national champion epeeist. So to that third man, which I think one of our greatest foil fencers, we owe him a great honor tonight, and we're happy to be here to welcome into the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Please reconsider.
Dad, it's one of my greatest honors to welcome you to the Hall of Fame.
That was a surprise. Holy cow. Never saw anything like that before. Wow. So, I gotta get this out. I do have notes. And I am not wearing glasses tonight, even though I'm very old, because I wrote real big letters here. That was really a surprise, and it caught me by storm here, and it was wonderful. But I'm very, very grateful. I'm going to try to be serious a little bit tonight. I'm tremendously grateful for this magnificent honor. The best thing about this honor is that I'm here with all of you, my family and my fencing friends that I've known for many years. So many of you that are here, and current friends and everything. And I do have to acknowledge some people quickly. I'm not here because there was a grand plan. I don't know how many of you had a plan in your life about fencing. I started fencing with Tom and Ellen Koukouris in New York because it looked cool. I wanted to be Zorro. Greg Macialis and I have a picture with Zorro together. We were in Buenos Aires at the 1977 World Championships, and there's Don Diego de la Vega, Zorro. And we imposed upon ourselves to get a picture with him. He was a gracious guy. So my plan wasn't to be here. My plan when I started to fence was because I loved fencing. I loved Zorro. I really did love Zorro. I loved the way it looked. I loved the classicalness of it. I loved everything about it, the athleticism. And that's what carried me here. That's why I'm here. It wasn't because there was a plan that is going to get me into the Naval Academy. I'm going to fence nationally and internationally. I love the sport of fencing, and I hope all of you do. Before I go any further, what makes me very proud in my life is my family who are here. Seated with, I'm just going to briefly introduce a couple, all of them really. My beautiful wife Donna is here, and everybody in our family says she's the most wonderful person in the world. If everybody will like her, the world would be a better place. You know my son Joey and my other son Jason over here, my best friends, business partners, golf partners, just partners in life. These guys are incredible. If you get a minute to talk to them, you'll see how wonderful they are. And I'm really fortunate that my two beautiful daughters-in-laws are here. One is filming me right now, Danny, and our oldest grandson Braylon, and Audrey, my beautiful daughter-in-law Audrey, and then our 2.5-year-old granddaughter, Madeline. And Madeline's pretty special. I hate to brag, but she can speak both French and English. At this age, her mother's from France. I'm from New York. I barely speak any English. So that impresses me a lot. You know, fencing started at the Naval Academy where I went to school, and I'm very proud of the Naval Academy. I went to the Naval Academy not because I knew anything about the military, but because they had a great fencing team and an amazing coach, and I really look good in blue. You should see me, don't you? That's very important. And the fencing started at the Naval Academy as
in 1845. It was on the curriculum. It was a course in 1845. It wasn't a varsity sport, and fencing continued. And the long tradition of fencing has been amazing at the Naval Academy all these years. And the great Bert Freeman that Jeff mentioned was the first fencer to win the Navy sword at graduation in 1970. It took that long, from 1845 to 1970, for a fencer to win the Navy sword, the outstanding athlete. That goes to a football player, a basketball player, not to a fencer. Come on. And he was also the first African American. He made a difference. And the tradition of the Naval Academy fencing is here today, because I have three of my closest friends and proteges of the great Andre Deladrier, if you knew him. This was a colorful, amazing man. And they're here with me today. Frank Hewitt, Dick Richards, and Dave Hitchcock. All Hall of Famers, IFA champions, and in the Naval Academy Athletic Hall of Fame, right back there. Those guys are unbelievable. They're legends in America. They're legends in fencing. So after graduation, I said, I got tired of wearing blue. I said I look really good in green, right, Richie? I look good in green. And I got together because a man brought us together. Now, you bring people with you. I brought an American hero today. So I've got a gentleman with me who formulated the Marine Corps fencing team, brought us together, gave us the resources to compete. And as you said, it's hard to compete when you're out of college. He brought us the resources. But this is an American hero. What's a hero? Hero isn't an athlete. Can you imagine you're the co-pilot of a helicopter in a war zone in Vietnam, and your plane gets, your helicopter gets shot down, you get ejected, you land, you're out, your right arm, I think it's right or left one of your arms, it's broken in three places, completely severed, you're out, you're lacerated. By the way, you've been shot. You come to, you're in a fiery wreckage, under enemy fire, and you go into the wreckage, and you're carrying Marines to safety with one arm. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Richard Pink, Okay, that's enough. This is about me. Come on, stop. Really enough. Oh, by the way, what I was describing is just paraphrasing from the President's Silver Star citation. I'm honored that you're here tonight, Colonel. So, as I went through, and then I got to compete, and fencing has been wonderful. What an avenue to meet so many people, and so many of my friends are here. I'm just tickled when I can tell you about where's Matthew Chin? My young friend Matthew Chin, my step-nephew, who took third in the Sabre Team Championship. And my good friend, my fencing partner, won a silver medal today and made the Veterans World Team, Steve Gross. Very tickled with him. And I love when my friends do well. But my Olympic teammates were really special to me. And I got to introduce a guy who's here with his wife, and they're both Olympians. Imagine two Olympians in one family. We've seen it here recently. And, everybody knows Sally Paczynski-Ballinger on the '68 Olympic team back here. She's been a wonderful friend for 50 years. And I got to introduce her husband, his claim to fame, the 1976 National Championship silver medalist. But I said, what about Marty Lang? And Marty Lang wasn't elected, but he was elected this year. And I'm going to take, I'm great Marty Lang. But I got to tell you, Marty, he did everything he could not to get elected. Did anybody read his biography the last years when he didn't get elected? He goes through the first three paragraphs talking about Martin Van Buren High School, this girl he dated, the lunch menu, all these things, and buried 3 paragraphs down. Oh, I was the Pan Am champion. I have 6 national championship gold medals. I was the first team All-American. I know at Donofrio. When did that happen? Congratulations, Marty. Unbelievably deserved. And by the way, this is one of the great athletes in American fencing. Not only a fencer, he almost made the senior pro tour as a golfer. This is just a tremendous athlete. And I'm mad about that, how good he is in golf too. The other member of the team, I made fun of him for being a national championship silver medalist. I'm going to keep repeating that as long as I live. But if
you ever saw Ed Ballinger fence, if you went into a fencing sal, and you know nothing about fencing, and some of you know that, if you went into a fencing sal and you saw Ed Ballinger over there fencing, you would say it's a thing of beauty. He was the most perfect fencer I ever saw. He was the best fencer I ever saw, the best technician of the sport. He was a great competitor. He did it with dignity and honor, and he was beautiful to watch. And Ed, I copied you. There's no greater compliment than that. I copied you. You're the best I've ever seen. Ed Ballinger. We talked about Bert Freeman. I told him about my other Olympic teammate made the difference for me. I would not be here if it wasn't for him. He's a brother to me. He's the best. He's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, one of the most brilliant fencers. He mentored me and taught me how to think on the fencing street. It wasn't about lunging and doing all the athletic stuff. It was about how to think. And I could go through his 2 national championship medals. I could talk about he was the IFA champion and his first team All-American, all the great things. But this was also a brilliant attorney. Who watches 60 Minutes? Anybody? Steve Momanda does when he's watching cartoons, I'm sure. I gotta pick on Steve. So as a young attorney, to show how brilliant he was, as a young attorney working for Berkson, Oakland, Margolis, and Adler, I can say that without my denture slipping, he won the largest antitrust settlement case in the history of antitrust law and was featured on 60 Minutes, the great Jeff Kessler. So, how good was I? I don't know. I really don't know. I won some bouts, I lost some bouts, I won bouts. I beat some good people, I lost to some idiots. You just don't know how good you are. But I'll tell you one thing, and I am proud of this. I worked as hard as I could. I did the best I could. I never took shortcuts, especially with Bert and Jeff. We did it the right way. I tried to conduct myself on a fencing strip the right way. I didn't argue, I didn't yell and scream. I only yelled and screamed one time after I beat Ed Ballinger and I was jumping up and down. That didn't happen often, so I was very happy. But from the scriptures, I want to just finish with this. I fought the good fight, and I finished the race. I kept the faith, and it brought me here. To have this magnificent honor. I'm so grateful for everybody and everybody in fencing. Thank you and God bless you.
I want to congratulate all the new Hall of Famers, especially all the ones who wear glasses this evening, and all those that have received awards in our sport. All of you, please start considering who could be honored next year and go on to the Hall of Fame link on US Fencing, or you can scan the QR code at the back of the program. Please do that so that we have something to look at this summer so we can start the process for next year. I would also like to recognize all the Hall of Fame inductees, some of them that are here for the class of 2024, and invite them, their families, and friends to the national championships in Columbus, Ohio. You are all in our hearts. Guys, making the Hall of Fame is not easy, nor should it be. Not only is it a lifetime of work and result, but it's a lifetime, in many cases, of service. Good night, good luck at the rest of the Nationals, and everyone have a safe trip home. That's all, folks.